The taillights disappeared into the rain before I even got my bag all the way out of the trunk. I stood under the awning of a Marathon station off Route 30, outside Wooster, Ohio, 26 years old, soaked through a jacket that was never built for weather like that, watching the only family I had left turn right at the light and vanish. My stepfather Roy had said, "Out the window, not even slowing down. Figure it out, Nathan. You always do." My mother didn't look back. My stepbrother Kyle laughed at something. I never found out what. My name is Nathan Voss. I want to tell you what happened in the 3 years after that night, because when my family found out, it broke something in the room that took them a long time to put back together. Before I go further, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. I read every one. Now let me take you back to that gas station and to who I was before it, so you understand exactly what changed. I'd grown up the odd piece in that household. My mother remarried Roy when I was 9, and Kyle came with him, 2 years older and effortless in a way I never learned to be. Roy ran a small trucking dispatch business and treated me like a hand he'd been dealt he didn't especially want. I paid my own way through community college, working nights at a warehouse. I covered rent more than once when Roy's business hit a rough patch. No thanks given, just an assumption that of course I would. The night of the storm, we'd been driving back from a cousin's wedding 2 hours out, and I'd said something at a rest stop about Roy running the business into the ground. True, and not kind, and Kyle had laughed the way he always did when I got in trouble for saying true things. Roy pulled into the Marathon station for gas, told me to get out and cool off, and by the time I came out of the bathroom, the car was gone. I had $41 in my wallet, a phone at 11% battery, and one duffel bag with 2 days of clothes in it. I also had, folded in the bag's side pocket, a business card a man named Kurt Ellison had handed me at that wedding an hour earlier, saying if I ever wanted real work instead of warehouse work, call him. I stood under that awning long enough to make a decision, not to call my mother, not to wait for someone to turn around, to stop being someone who could be left behind. The first week I slept on Kurt's couch in Akron, a stranger from a wedding who turned out to have more decency in him than the family I'd grown up in. He ran a small commercial HVAC installation company, 6 guys, mostly word of mouth, and he put me on a crew the following Monday. I didn't know a compressor from a condenser. I learned fast, because I had nothing else to fall back on, and nowhere else to sleep if I didn't. Kurt noticed. He started handing me the estimates to shadow, then the billing. Then, 18 months in, he told me over lunch that he was tired, that his knees were done, and asked if I wanted to buy in. I didn't have the money. Kurt structured it as a note against future earnings, said he'd rather sell to somebody who'd earned it than somebody with a checkbook and no idea how the work actually got done. There was a stretch that first winter where we nearly lost 2 commercial contracts in the same month, and I sat in my car in a parking lot doing math that didn't work, wondering if I'd traded one kind of being stranded for another. We kept it together by underbidding a competitor on a school district contract that everyone said we'd lose money on. We didn't lose money on it. It became the account that carried the business through the following year. There was a stretch in the second year I don't talk about much. We lost a foreman to a competitor 2 weeks before the start of a hospital wing retrofit, our biggest job to date, and I spent 9 days on site myself, in coveralls, running ductwork at 2 in the morning because payroll didn't stop just because I was scared. I called Kurt at one point, past midnight, and asked him honestly if I'd made a mistake taking this on. He didn't reassure me. He just said, "You'll know by Friday whether you're the kind of person who finishes this," and hung up. I finished it. The hospital became a 5-year maintenance contract afterward, the first one that let me sleep through a night without doing math in my head. I learned to read a blueprint that year, then a balance sheet, then, slower, how to read people, which foreman was telling me the truth about a delay, and which one was covering for a friend. I learned to fire someone for the first time, a man twice my age who'd been stealing copper off job sites, and I learned that it didn't feel like power, it felt like a stomachache that lasted 3 days. I bought my first work truck with my name on the door in year 2. I still remember sitting in it in an empty parking lot afterward, not driving anywhere, just sitting there, with both hands on the wheel, the way you'd hold something you weren't sure was really yours yet. By the time 3 years had passed since that night at the Marathon station, Voss Mechanical Systems had 4 commercial contracts, 19 employees, and revenue that had crossed 2.1 million the previous fiscal year. I bought Kurt's remaining share outright the month I turned 29. On my wrist that day was a watch Kurt had given me at the closing table. Plain, steel, nothing flashy. The kind of thing a man gives you when he means it as a marker, not a gift. None of my family knew any of this was happening. As far as they were concerned, I'd disappeared into whatever a person disappears into when nobody's watching. The call came from my mother on a Tuesday. Roy's dispatch business had lost its biggest client and was 3 months behind on a loan against the family house, the same house I'd covered rent on twice without thanks. She didn't call to check on me. She called because Kyle had mentioned at some family gathering I wasn't invited to that I'd apparently done well for myself, some kind of HVAC thing, and could I maybe help? I agreed to meet them at my office on my terms. My mother arrived with Roy and Kyle on a Thursday morning and stood in the lobby of a building with our name on the glass door, clearly expecting a garage and a work truck. Roy looked around, the way a man looks around when the numbers in his head stop adding up. Kyle said, half joking, half not, "This can't all be yours, right? Someone's got to be fronting this." I let that sit for a second before I answered. "It's mine," I said. "All 19 employees, the building, the fleet. 2.1 million last year." Nobody said anything for a moment. My mother's face did something complicated. Pride and shame trying to occupy the same space. "You left me at a gas station in a storm outside Worcester," I said, still evenly, "because I want you to understand I'm not still standing there. I built this instead. Every dollar of it started the week after you drove off." Roy found his voice first. "Nathan, that was a long time ago. We were all stressed that day." "I know exactly how long ago it was," I said. 3 years, 1 month, and 11 days. I still have the jacket I was wearing. I kept it on purpose. I didn't need to remind them what they'd done. The math did that on its own. Sitting right there in the lobby, 19 names on a payroll they hadn't known existed a week earlier. I didn't hand Roy a check that day. I told him I'd think about it, and I did, for 2 weeks, and then I made a decision that surprised even me. I paid off the loan against the house, directly to the bank, not to Roy, so my mother would keep a roof, regardless of what Roy did with the business afterward. I did not invest in Roy's company. I told him plainly that I didn't trust his judgment with money, mine or his own, and that this was the last time I'd be stepping in. Kyle called me a month later, alone, no Roy on the line. He said he'd thought about that night more than he'd ever admitted, and that laughing had been easier than saying something, and he was sorry for the easier thing. I told him I appreciated it, and that I wasn't ready to call us close again, but I wasn't opposed to trying, slowly, on terms that didn't involve gas stations or storms. We've had 2 dinners since then. They're still a little stiff. I think that's honest, and I'd rather have honest than smooth. My mother and I talk sometimes now, careful conversations, mostly about small things. She asked me once, on the phone, quietly, whether I'd ever forgive her for not looking back that night. I told her I didn't know yet, and that I thought it was more honest to say that than to hand her an easy yes, just to end an uncomfortable silence. She said she understood. I think she actually did. Roy and I haven't spoken since the loan was settled, and I've made my peace with that particular silence. Some doors close and they're allowed to stay closed. Not every relationship in a family survives being tested, and I've stopped pretending mine all should. This past winter, I drove past that Marathon station on my way to a job site nearby. I pulled in, bought a coffee, and stood under the same awning for a minute in the cold, the way you'd stand at a grave to check that you'd actually survived something. I still have the jacket. It's in a box in my closet, not out of sentiment exactly, more as a kind of receipt. I don't know what all of them think of me now. I know what I think of myself, and that's the part that changed permanently, standing under that awning with $41 and a business card, deciding I would rather build something from nothing than wait to be picked up by people who'd already made their choice. Now I want to hear from you. Has anyone in your family ever left you to figure it out completely on your own, and did it end up making you into someone they didn't expect? Tell me in the comments below, and where you're watching from. If this story landed for you, share it with somebody who needed to hear it, and I'll see you in the next one.